Rex, thanks very much for agreeing to be part of the series of Meet the Trustees. I think it's an opportunity for some of the clients to take a bit of a breather and to actually just understand who are some of the providers out in the industry, to also understand the individuals behind the companies, which I think is such an important component here of. We've, in a professional perspective, have had a relationship, you and I, for over the past 10 years. And, I think it's an important one when individuals look at not just overseas trust and pension, but, who's the director behind the company? What is your role been specifically in the international pension, space? What interactions have you had, particularly around the Guernsey 40WE plans? How have you seen these change? So today's really going to be about just an opportunity for the listeners to get an understanding of that. So I think let's kick us off with the question, Rex, which is, who is Rex and overseas trust and pension, and where's the bit of the background, and fill us in terms of you.
Yeah, well, I suppose I started out life in 1990. I started working, so I've been in financial services now for 35 years. So it's quite a time. My background has always been, I suppose, on the wealth side. So private client wealth, looking at helping clients protect and preserve their assets. That's been a big focus, giving clients the ability to have structures into which they can accumulate wealth, grow it, access it when they need it, and then pass it on to future generations or beneficiaries. So I think that's very much been what I've been involved in. But I've always worked on the premise that everyone has a right to sort of a safe haven for their funds, and those assets should be safe and secure. So I think that's sort of the basis of where I've come from. I suppose the Overseas Trust and Pension itself, we established that back in 2012. And the reason for that was it was quite simple, really. I'd worked for a lot of big organizations, JP Morgan, Chase, Manhattan, Royal Bank of Canada, I don't know, a number of other big firms that I'd worked for over the years. And I felt that I could do it better than them. And I think, that you're a younger man, you think that. Luckily, I think luck's a part of it. Established the Overseas Trust and Pension in 2012 with two other gentlemen who are also in this space. Based on, I suppose, our approach, the company has grown over the years. We probably have about 6,000 customers, 3 billion of assets under administration, and those are assets that have been entrusted to us by clients to safeguard. That's the way that we look at it. In terms of the services that we offer clients, it's very straightforward. It's, as it says on the tin, Overseas Trust and Pension. We do trusts and pensions. We don't do anything else. So I'd like to think we're quite specialized in what we do. Our client base is from all over the world, predominantly a large exposure to British expatriates. We've got lots of British expatriates, both working and retired. And then some of the other diasporas as well, South African expatriates, Australians, New Zealanders, so some of those Commonwealth parts of the world. Yeah, so I think that's the basis of it. And I think from, in terms of helping clients and advisors achieve the outcomes that they want, I mean, that's what we fundamentally about. And that outcome can mean different things to different people. Yeah, and it could be a retirement. It could be educating the kids. It could be looking after the grandkids, making sure your spouse is okay once you've passed away. So it's working with financial advisors to help clients achieve those outcomes.
And Rex, whereabouts is OTAP currently regulated?
Okay, so we are a Guernsey-based trust and pension company. So Guernsey is our primary home in terms of regulation. However, we do have an additional license in South Africa. So we're also regulated in South Africa because we have a large client base out here in South Africa. So we jointly regulated, but the lead regulation is Guernsey. and I suppose that's where the head office is. It's in our Guernsey operation.
Okay. And Rex, when it comes to your role, a lot of the clients are, I think, struggling a little bit to understand the breadth of what a trustee does. So, what would you kind of simply define a trustee does, whether it be, we are talking about international pension plans, but potentially a cure ops or fall in the same realm? How would you explain where your role starts, stops, and even a component of reporting?
Okay. It all comes down to the rules of the product or the scheme that you're in. So they will dictate what the trustee's role is, and then that needs to be considered in conjunction with the legislation and regulations that apply. So if you consider a trustee's role on a discretionary trust, that's going to be incredibly broad. Whereas if you consider a trustee's role on a pension, it's going to be far more narrow. So on a pension plan, really what you're responsible for as the trustees is making sure that when the money's received, it's invested, it's accounted for whilst it's in the plan, and when the client needs to draw benefit, you can pay them their benefit. When the client passes on, the funds go to the successor beneficiaries. So a pension is a relatively straightforward vehicle, and the trustee's responsibilities are constrained really to ensuring that it delivers in those areas. However, the trustee also needs to ensure that the safety of those assets. So if you're going to put assets with a custodian, that custodian is a decent custodian, and the client's assets aren't going to be lost, for example. So will be one of the things. And of course, the other area that pension trustees aren't usually responsible for is the investment management. So yeah, that's where your financial advisor will take on responsibility for your investment management. In a discretionary trust, that's usually different. The trustees usually have an oversight role over the investment manager. Because a pension scheme, the member can take responsibility for managing the investments. The member can appoint a financial advisor to run those investments, or the manager can ask us to do it. So you really have three different options. So that's a bit different from a trust. Yes, so that responsibility is determined at the point when someone enters into the pension. And of course, you can change it. You might find you've been trying to do it yourself, and after a few years, you actually want to enjoy yourself, so you appoint an advisor to do it for you. So you can change that responsibility, but it's not a foregone conclusion that the trustee is responsible for everything. When it comes to investments, then it's very defined.
Got you. And Rex, I mean, one of the challenges, obviously, within the Bright book has been the suspension. And the question I've probably got here is, what is the trustee's responsibility from ongoing reviews, ongoing due diligence? And you can also please context that from, as you said, safeguarding the assets. What about any legislative changes, budget changes as well? What is a requirement, and obviously what you as OTAP have as your internal policies?
I think the overriding responsibilities is for us to act in line with the laws that govern us. So as long as you're doing that, you're not really going to go far wrong. So I think that's the critical thing. I think you're talking about the Bright book, and I appreciate the people that are listening to this are going to have had Bright as a service provider. I think there's a fundamental point with regards to all of that, which is what made the whole situation quite different is that, based on my understanding, is that the trustees that ran those pensions entered into contractual terms with Bright, which allowed the assets in the pension scheme to sit in accounts in Bright's name. That's my understanding of the fundamental issue. If that hadn't happened, I don't believe that we'd be in the position, or the position would be as it is today. I suppose we were encouraged to work with Bright, and we didn't, because those contractual arrangements didn't favor customer security. So we did it. None of our pensions ever got managed by Bright. So I think trustees do have a responsibility to ensure that when entering into contractual arrangements, that they do take into account the I suppose the liabilities that come with that contract. So I don't know if I'm answering that very clearly, Ian, but I think the point there is, as a trustee, you can't just enter into a contract and at the end of it doesn't work out. Go, oh, that's a shame. I believe you are responsible for that, because you should have read that contract and understood it and what the terms of the contract were. And yeah, so I think that's one of the key bits, is those contractual devices. You're relying on your trustees to do that due diligence properly. You really are relying on them, and you should be able to rely on them.
And Rex, is there for my own understanding, is there a written requirement, if you are Guernsey regulated or part of the international pension plan, that you have at least a once a year or twice a year, I don't know, audit or good standing? I mean, is there a regulatory requirement, I should ask?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's an awful lot of safeguards in place in Guernsey. So, for example, yes, we are subject to, as a pension business in Guernsey, you're subject to annual independent audit. You also have to carry a certain level of prudential insurance. Things can go wrong, and you have to have sufficient cover in place to ensure that if things do go wrong, the customer is made whole, and if you have to draw an insurance, it's in place. So you've got those kind of safeguards, and of course you also have capital adequacy requirements, which require you to have sufficient operating capital at all times, so that the business remains solvent, so the business doesn't go out of business, leaving the pension scheme unmanaged or without an administrator. So there's quite a lot of regulation in place, and that gets assessed on an ongoing basis. So we submit multiple returns every year throughout the year to the regulator, covering all different types or parts of the operations of the business. So the regulator has a really good understanding of what's going on with pension companies, in the same way it does it with banks and life insurance companies.
Okay. Oh, listen, that makes sense. Product specific. So you've had a very extensive background dealing, changing landscape in the international pension plan space. Can you just give some background to that for the listeners? Because obviously a lot of them are in your international pension plans, the 40W scheme. So I think that's probably one key. I'm not going to punt you, but the differentiator I know is you have been around this legislation for a long time. So can you just give some background to that?
I think the Guernsey legislation is good legislation. And it's very robust, and it was effectively built on the UK's concept of pensions back in the 1970s, and it's enhanced and developed since then. So you have really good legislation and regulation. But I suspect the people that are listening to this, you probably don't live in Guernsey, you live in another country. So what really becomes important then is how the Guernsey scheme is developed to work with the legislation and rules in the country in which you find yourself living. So if you look at what we do, we build our solutions bottom up. So let's say our products. So we have product for the South African market, we have product for the Spanish market or the Portuguese market or the Australian market, etc., etc. So our products are built bottom up. And what that means, it means that the outcome that the client can expect is the outcome that they receive, because you've got this marrying of the Guernsey legislation with the domestic legislation. So they're talking the same language. So there's certainty in how the client's going to be treated, often from a tax perspective, or from a legal perspective in terms of the asset and the safety of the asset. So I think that's what Guernsey facilitates, but then it takes the product provider to develop the products at a country specific level. So I think what differentiates us from a lot of providers is we build things bottom up, as opposed to having a plan that you just sell into a territory. Our products are country specific.
Okay, makes sense. And OTAP's interaction with this, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but was probably one of the first companies that was looking at this, considering it. I mean, even yourself being debating and looking at the product itself, if I'm not incorrect.
Yeah, we developed about 2004. Developed one of the first multi-member personal pension schemes, international schemes, at the time, and by 2008, that design had become the global standard for international pensions. So yeah, I think we were quite pioneering back in the day. You like to take credit for these things, but the reality is we just look for the best ideas worldwide and sort of copy them. So, but it's the principles of multi-member pension schemes of a personal nature. So we definitely were very advanced in pioneering that. I also worked with the Guernsey Association of Pension Providers back in the early parts of the 2000s to put in place the principles, the guiding principles for pension providers, which eventually became regulation. And over the years, I've consulted with people like the Cayman Pension Supervisory Commission, assisting them developing their regulations. Myself and one of the other co-founders of our business were instrumental in helping Gibraltar bring its pension legislation to the front. We worked with the law firms that set up their regulations. So we've got quite a lot of. I mean, that's what we do. We very, very much pension people. It's in our blood, basically. So I think we've got a really good insight into the construction of pensions and how you can use them to ensure that clients' needs are met, how best to design them, and then the regulations around that to support them and protect clients.
Got you. And Rex, for the listeners, bullet points type of summary. Why should they look at OTAP? Why should they consider yourselves? What would you kind of want to leave them with in terms of just thoughts on helping them consider?
Yeah, I suppose we're an independent firm, so we don't have any conflict of interest. I think the other thing that you'll know this, Ian, is that when we work with financial advisors, we don't pay financial advisors to use our products. There's no commission. There's no commissions paid from us to financial advisors. In other words, they use our products for the right reasons, and I think that's really important. And that is not necessarily a common situation, in the industry. All our pricing is what we call client agreed remuneration. In other words, the customer agrees the pricing with their financial advisor in respect of their services, and the customer can cancel that arrangement at any one point in time. So it puts the client in control. The client's unhappy around fees and that they can actually stop those fees. And I think that's very much on sort of the advice side. But it gives the clients a degree of control, which is important. I think the other thing is, all of our products are subject to the Ombudsman services in the Channel Islands. If the Ombudsman in the Channel Islands is a fully independent body, it operates on fairness. It looks at, was the outcome for the client fair? Doesn't look at all the contractual devices and technicalities that could otherwise maybe stop a client from getting a fair outcome. Disregards that. It really looks at, is it a fair outcome, and their decisions are binding. So in terms of recourse, if something happens in the Channel Islands, there's proper recourse for clients. They don't have to go to court. They can go to the Ombudsman. It's free, and the Ombudsman has no limit in terms of the financial rewards that they can apply. So really, really good. And of course, our products are covered by that. So, you've got to do a good job, or you could find that you've got a really big bill to pay. So I think, regulation and legislation is good. As I said, our products are all developed bottom up. And our pricing is very transparent. We have pricing schedules. Clients sign up to them. They know what they're going to pay. There aren't hidden charges and fees associated with that. And as I said, the client's got controls that the pricing arrangements with their advisor. So transparency, I think, is really important. The other bit, Ian, as I said, we're independent. We don't dictate the custodian you need to use. So, for example, with Bright, the custodian that was being used was dictated, and that was part of the problem. But with us, the client selects that party with the financial advisor. So we're not party to that process. So if the client wants to utilize, I don't know, BNP Paribas, or they want to use capital markets, or they want to use DMA, or whoever it might be as the custodian to hold those assets, or one of the big life companies, that's not our decision. That's the client's decision in conjunction with the advisor. And as I said at this, I said, I think at the start, having those duties segregated is very, very important, because if you control the assets, own the assets, and can do what you want with the assets, there's a problem, isn't there? So ensuring that the client is involved in that selection process, I think, is really important, and not us. We don't choose the investments. We don't choose the custodians. I think that's really important. And I think those are the main bits. I mean, we do what we do. I think we do it well. We've grown, and that's on the back of people placing their money with us and having the right experience.
I agree with you. So, Rex, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to cover or mention? Is there anything that's you think of?
Yeah, I just think I appreciate that, as you mentioned to me, I think offline, Ian, that there is a decision that's coming with regards to people's funds that are at the moment frozen. I think that's what you mentioned to me, and I would say once you're through that process, and depending what the outcome of that is, and hopefully it's a positive outcome, and funds are going to be able to be released, just do all your homework. As is my thing, do your homework. Make sure that you read. If you're going to go into anything, read the documentation. Don't be scared to ask the question, or even if you think it's a stupid question. I always say there's only stupid answers. There's no stupid question. So ask the questions and get independent verification. If you want to use somebody, speak to someone else that might have used them or knows the company, and includes us. And nothing like an independent verification of something from someone who's happy in a place. So yeah, I think those would just be my thoughts, Ian.
Yeah, I think it's a quality one to actually end on. So, Rex, I'm going to give you two final fun questions, just so people can also see Rex Cowley. Favorite food, favorite pastime?
Sure. Now that's a difficult one. I love food.
I didn't prep you on this, so that's why I just wrote it down. I thought this would be fun. Favorite food, favorite pastime?
My favorite pastime is usually the kids, but outside of the kids, I'm an avid carpenter and metal worker, so I love making wooden furniture and utilizing steel in conjunction with it. So that's what I do as a hobby. It's got nothing to do with pensions, as far away as pensions as possible. Favorite food, goodness, given the cold temperatures today, it would have to be a curry.
Brilliant. Well, Rex, I learned something brand new today. So thank you very much. And in closing on my side, I just want to reiterate the conversation that you've just had, and also mention the point of do the homework, understand it, don't be under the pressure. There's a lot of emotions that are riding at the moment, and it's been a journey. I mean, we're coming up on a 2-year mark from when all of this happened, and I think it's important to have these conversations, to understand, and like you said, be able to just know what and where, and the key questions of it. But I think for anybody that's listening on the side, if there's more information that you want to receive, please reach out to my team and myself. Rex and his team are superbly quick in terms of providing support and information and whatever is required. But Rex, thank you for today. I appreciate it, and we always appreciate your time and support.
Yeah, and let's fingers crossed there's a good outcome in the not too distant future for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Take care.